All right. Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Mustang Robotics Symposium series. I am your director, Jacob Ursua, and behind the scenes we also have producers Jai Liang and Sophia Pantoja. Our program greatly appreciates each and every one of you for coming to the show tonight. In fact, we would like to graciously invite you to type in chat and let us know who you are. Please tell us your name, school, organization, anything, and we would gladly shout you out in subsequent episodes. And if you have any questions for the guests throughout the stream, feel free to put those in the chat as well. But anyways, please welcome the host of the Mustang Robotics Symposium series, Mr. Chad Pearson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our Alumni Symposium series that we're holding this year during the COVID-19 2021 VEX Robotics season. We are a program located in San Diego area, Chula Vista, California. We're near the border of Mexico, and we are Team 507. We've been around for a little while, and we are lucky enough to be able to dip into a pool of alumni that have really been gracious about returning and providing us some insight into how they journeyed through the VEX program, made some decisions at the end of high school, jumped on into college and where they are now. And today we have a guest. His name is Steven Salazar, and I'd love to welcome Steven.
Hello,
How are
everyone.
you, buddy?
Thank you for having me.
We are very happy you're here today. Steven, one of the things that we will start with is the reality that you are officially one of our original members in our mind. And I know that you're one of the younger members on that original team,
Yeah.
but I actually think this is cool because you know and I know we're hundreds deep in the alumni, hundreds strong in alumni out there, but you did get on that first Mustang team. So why don't we start there? Why don't we start with the idea of freshman year, Otay Ranch High School? What are you doing? How does robotics affect you?
Well, that's kind of funny you say that. Like, I'm one of the first members of the team because to me, there was like a generation before me, and we called them the seniors. They were there like the very first year because robotics actually started when I was in 8th grade in middle school. So coming in, I was a freshman. And so I think it was the 3rd year Mustang Robotics was actually like a thing. And so there was like an older team. We just call them the seniors because even though they were juniors at the time, they were just older than us. So we called them the seniors. But yeah, my first year of VEX Robotics, it was super fun. And we honestly started off really, really lucky. Our very first competition of the year, our robot was absolutely horrible. Like we were freshmen, we were just brand new. We didn't know what we were doing at all. Like our chassis was like sagging in the middle. We literally didn't score 1 point until the very finals. And the reason we were in the finals is because the first seeded team, they used to pick like 3 teams per an alliance, and they needed a 3rd team like after all 8 alliances had chosen their first seed. And they're just like, oh, we'll pick that team. And it was luckily us. So we were like super, super excited.
You make me feel like they covered their eyes and just be like pointed to see
that's literally what happened because, you know, they show all the team numbers on the projector. And then because I think that like some teams had like denied their request, so they're just like, oh, we'll go with whatever. And luckily it was us.
And that becomes a nervous moment. I think a lot of people out there in our audience definitely know that whole alliance selection and what goes on. And so you actually start, and this is before I'm part of the mentorship, the advisors of the group. And so this is all before me. And you guys have a really nice run at that year. I believe you guys make it to Worlds for your freshman year, right?
I think we qualified for Worlds, but we only actually went to nationals. Yeah, like I think that was the only year that our team ever went to nationals. And we went to nationals just because it was cheaper than going to Worlds. I think nationals was in Omaha, Nebraska. It was in like the bleakest place I've ever been to. Like the color palette of the town was like gray and brown. All the grass was dead. it was just like a very depressing town to be in.
Now, if you happen to be tuning in and you live in that town, we're showing this in all just kind of retrospect of a young 14-year-old.
Yeah.
But the idea of what Steven, I think, is really getting at is another experience he has, which we hope to get at, is going to Worlds. And that in Anaheim back in the day really was that experience that you guys would understand as being in Kentucky in the last few years.
Yeah.
And so, Steven, sophomore year, junior year, that's where I kind of come into play. I'm now part of robotics. I think this part's really interesting for everyone to know out there. Robotics isn't just Steven loving robotics. Steven happened to have to access a family member to let robotics grow. And it happened to be his mom, who became the advisor in Mustang Robotics for multiple years. Your mom also helped start the league in San Diego. She was a major part of this. And then she gave me the gift of ownership and took off to enjoy her chemistry courses and everything else. Yeah. And so we have this interesting growth pattern of Mustang Robotics. It's growing over the time you're there. Do you realize that it's starting to form a much larger group and a friendship ring and feeling just like you're building a brother sisterhood at that time?
Yeah, like I remember like we were closest friends with actually the school called Chadwick. They weren't even in our robotics league, but we were best friends with them just because there was like this rich private school in LA, like on this very top of a hill. But the kids are super cool. Like they're super down to earth, and we were good friends with them. We went to Korean barbecue with them afterwards.
If you're a Mustang, you understand the Korean barbecue.
Yeah,
it's after every tournament, and it's been for 10 years.
Yeah.
And so you're talking the reaching out. I'm talking within the Mustang family itself. Do you realize like those are those growth years as us as an after school club? We're literally hanging out, and we grow from 2 teams when you start, 1 team when you start, to by the time you graduate, we have 5, 6 active teams. One year we had 6, correct?
Yeah, like I don't know why, but it seemed like everyone wanted to join robotics, like kind of when I was maybe like junior year.
That's great.
Yeah, I don't know why, honestly. I think
go ahead, my friend.
I honestly think it's because like sometimes kids would watch us like get out of class, you know, to go work on our robots. And so it was a good excuse. And like all the teachers, they knew we were good students. So they're just like, yeah, whatever, just go do it. Just go do it.
Yeah, I have a couple of students out there right now going, Mr. Pearson's not that lenient anymore about leaving class. He can do his room. So Steven, there's just a lot of truth to the idea that Mustang Robotics grows a lot during that time period when your team is around, and a few other students that we actually will be having coming and talking to us as alumni. And so we hit robotics. You got to tell us a little bit about what you felt about Worlds. I do know that you also threw out something that made me laugh because you remembered the blocking bot or the wall bot from back in the day when people used to try to play defense. And we don't really see that so much as the main idea. But you go to Worlds, and what was the experience like for you?
Worlds was a lot of fun, honestly. Like it was mostly fun just because it was like traveling with the team, and we got to stay all in a hotel together. We all just kind of like it was just fun being together. It felt like we were on vacation almost.
It did.
Yeah.
And that year we traveled kind of twice because we also ran up to Northern California to be able to do the state championships. So we almost had 2 back-to-back trips as a large group.
Are you talking about like 2013?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. 2013 was a lot. We went to San Jose, and like that was the most fun that States was because it was at a amusement park, and we got afterwards. There's a lot of good memories from there. And then Worlds, it was fun just actually like competing against a bunch of other like basically the best in the world, because that's what it was. And you got like I specifically remember like because they would have skills fields going around and you could see the teams practicing. I just remember like being able to like see the teams that we looked up on YouTube all throughout the year. We're like, oh shit, that's them in person.
Yeah, a little bit of stardom feeling because of the idea that you were using them as a resource. Literally, using them as a resource. And one of the things that is interesting about our club for everyone listening, is we do everything after school hours, nothing during the day, nothing during class time usually. I mean, yes, a kid may sneak out after a test and get a few extra minutes, but we're spending hours and hours and hours at night, weekends together, and we're showing this success level. Steven, I think what you started really hasn't ended, that dedication to
That's
the
good.
engineering process.
Yeah,
It's a
because
wonderful thing.
it honestly wasn't like that before we were there. Like our freshman year, it kind of everything changed after we went to nationals, because once we went to nationals, we kind of got a better sense of like what robots could actually do, because we saw like good robots, you know, and you're kind of exposed to like similar teams around the LA area, and there's usually like the good few schools who usually dominate. But after we came back from nationals, we learned so much from just like competing against other robots and like seeing what other really good teams were doing. And we talked to them a lot. We asked them about like gear ratios. Like we had no idea what gear ratios were before we even went to nationals.
The look on your guys' face when I used to talk about gear ratios, you guys would just look at me like we don't even want to be there. Just leave us alone. Let us go right back to what we like.
Yeah.
There's a lot of truth to that. So, Steven, you're making me feel like robotics really was a major part of your high school.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Like all of my good friends that like I still hang out with, like most of them were in robotics. Like you just make so many good memories, like putting in like your heart into this robot, and everyone's that is super dedicated to it. Like everyone's down to put in the extra hours, the long hours, the Saturdays, Sundays, because everyone wants to win, you know?
You know, the one thing I always remember about you and your crew was you guys would come in and talk about text messaging and sending things constantly to each other, and just like ideas at like 1, 2 in the morning. And I was almost worried you were too obsessed with it. And then realizing just that was your glory moment of thinking was somehow in the middle of the night, things would click. I also remember you bringing in the robot that had shifting gears, and it went so fast across the field that it ran into the other side almost before it could shift.
Yeah.
It was an incredible idea, just didn't apply. Wonderful summer work. And so we get through the end of, so now we get to where a lot of our audience wants to enjoy the conversation. We get to a point of you're ending high school, you got all this VEX robotics behind you, you have engineering. I would say you have engineering in the blood, and it's stuck, and you know kind of what you want to do. What was your decision-making process? How did you narrow down your schools? How did you finally pick your school?
One of the like private colleges that I actually toured first was Harvey Mudd, and my mom was like, "Oh, this is an engineering school. You should go here." Because like I basically knew that I wanted to do engineering, like mechanical engineering. Specifically, like I was between mechanical or aerospace, but I was like, mechanical seems kind of cooler. You get to make things that move. I'll do that. And I honestly didn't super quite know what I was getting into. Or I kind of did, but like not exactly what kind of job.
You know, a category you were heading off into or a field, but you didn't know the title of the end career or job.
Exactly. Yeah. I just knew I wanted to be engineer, you know, like I knew that I enjoyed building things, designing things, and testing them. And so I knew that's what I wanted to do. So like I toured Harvey Mudd, I toured like USC, UCSD, I think UCLA. So like I toured like these kind of like cool like engineering schools. I didn't get into USC. I didn't apply to Harvey Mudd, and so basically like the best school that I got into was UCSD, and so I was like, okay, I'll go there.
And it happens to be local for where we're located in the United States. For all the individuals listening, we are in an area of a lot of mechanical engineering, lots of drone type businesses, some mechanical engineering, all of that in this area, in this hub. But we also have UCSD, which is now becoming a premier college for robotics in the world. And it's located right next to the ocean in one of the most beautiful places, and right down the street from where you live. So you get all of these bonuses of really not having to move out of your house or get that distance. And so you pick UCSD, and we've actually had some conversations with students in past episodes talking about first and second year at UCSD and doing clubs and government and things like that. And so if anyone out there would like to go to episode 1, you can listen to Annika talk about some of those things. But I am interested in the engineering club that you joined on campus. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I didn't end up joining Yonder Dynamics until my third year at UCSD. So Yonder Dynamics, it's a club on campus, and they compete in something called the University Rover Challenge.
Okay.
And so the University Rover Challenge is a global competition. It's basically like just once a year at like the end of the year, end of the school year. So around like April, March time. And so teams have to come together and build this basically like mock Mars rover. And so it needs to compete in these different challenges. It needs to be able to go over like rough terrain. It needs to be able to navigate autonomously. It needs to be able to collect science samples, and you need to be able to analyze these samples. And then I think the last task is you need to operate like a panel full of things that require dexterous handwork. So I think it's like astronaut assistance task is what it's
Sounds
called.
like an overgrown VEX challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Were you ready for it? Did you think that at first? You were like, "Oh, this is just like VEX again."
Like honestly, like I took on a lot of design work for the team because I was like, I've done this before. I was like, I can design a robot.
Well, and as alumni, we joke every once in a while with other alumni and me as a mentor that a lot of the things that kids design kind of look vexish when they first get their first year into college. And you're like, but the teacher's responses are always, "Oh my God, you're so far ahead of everyone else because it just clicked. You gave me a product. You gave me something functional." But man, it sure looked like a lot of those techniques you learned with VEX. So you found your comfort zone, and again, the name of the club is called
it's called Yonder Dynamics at UCSD.
Yonder, like Yonder. I gotcha. And so Yonder Dynamics becomes like an after-school activity, or is it considered something during the day actually you're getting credit for?
No, so it was strictly a club. Like we didn't get any club. I think you were able to like apply to make it count as an elective, and some of the club members did that, but it only counted if you were a certain major, I think. And so,
well, I may have to shop you on this one in the future, Steven, and see if you can pass along the name of a person in that club, and maybe we can have that person come and talk to us a little bit. That would be an interesting conversation. So, Steven, now let's really talk about your going for your mechanical engineering degree. You're in a program at UCSD. Why don't you just walk us through, because in past episodes, we start to learn that at UCSD, they have multiple colleges. Each of them has a name. There's some overlap of the colleges. And so I'm wearing my UCSD shirt with mad respect of the Jacobs School of Engineering. But why don't you walk us through all those titles and get us to where we would understand what are you studying senior year, and in which, I don't want to call it a department, but what school are you in? What's the name of the program?
So it's pretty confusing, I guess, because UCSD, like when I went, I had 6 colleges, and these are basically areas of campus that the freshman and sophomore lived on. And depending on what college you got into, you had to take different GEs, which was, I thought, like what a lot of students thought was pretty dumb, because if you got into Revell, you had to take a lot more writing GEs and a lot more classes that some kids saw as useless. But I talked to
I totally thought of that choosing hat from Harry Potter, and like, how do they figure out which house you go to? Like, they just randomly select you?
Yeah, so when you apply to UCSD, you have to pick your first rank and your second rank college. And so Ryan De Leon, he's also a Mustang Robotics member. He was on the senior team that I talked about earlier. He went to UCSD, and I asked him, I was like, which college should I go to? He's like, oh, hands down, Muir. It's the easiest college. I was like, okay, I got you. And so I applied to that, and I got into Muir, and it was the easiest college in terms of GEs, because you had to take the least amount of writing GEs.
But that's an interesting one, Stephen, because for some people, I'm sure the GEs that applied to you in that college would be actually maybe not their favorite, and other individuals, our notebook writers out there, our
Yeah.
engineering
Yeah.
notebook people, they may actually. So
Yeah.
what you did hit on it, and I think that's super important, which is trying to find a peer who's a year ahead or two ahead of you and get that advice from someone who's already walked the pathway.
For
And so
sure.
you benefit from Ryan going, hey, little brother, check this out. Avoid that one because it's not your style. But I think for the people out there, that's something to look into and realize part of the way that you approach your school is going to have to include that idea of thinking that way and investigating the school. And so you end up in the John Muir College, but Muir for short.
Yeah. So it's John Muir College, and it's basically like this area on campus. And I think it's the prettiest area on campus because it's basically like the nature themed college.
Gotcha. Is it all the eucalyptus trees and stuff?
Not really. It's kind of it just kind of has a lot of grassy areas and a lot of really tall trees.
Very cool. So it fits the name. And so you end up in John Muir College, and your choice field is like mechanical engineering, structural engineering.
No, I actually got in as undeclared because engineering and a lot of engineering, computer science majors at UCSD are impacted. So when I accepted UCSD, like I was undeclared, and so in order to get into mechanical engineering, I had to basically like petition or apply to get into mechanical engineering. And the only thing that they looked at was like your GPA, like after the first I think year of college.
Gotcha.
And so the first year of college was kind of stressful because I was working to get into my major, and so I had to get good grades.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I did from the beginning was just go to office hours. I think that's the biggest help, is that you kind of have more personal time with the professor, and so they kind of get to know your name too. If you ever need something, they'll recognize you and they'll be like, oh yeah, sure, whatever.
Because you gave them the office hours. That's excellent advice, Stephen. Yeah. I consistently hear reports from students who were incredibly successful in high school, and they go to college, and reality kind of strikes that college is not high school. College has different requirements. So everyone, search out that writing center, search out your assistants, and search out your office hours, I think is what Steven's telling you.
Yeah, for sure.
So Steven, did you end up having to try to apply to more than one of those? Like, did you apply to structural engineering, mechanical engineering, aerospace?
No, they only let you choose. Yeah, they only let you choose one. And so I chose mechanical engineering. I was really close to choosing aerospace again, but I was like, I'll go with mechanical. And I'm really glad that I did, because mechanical is very broad and you can use it for a lot more job opportunities than aerospace.
I like that. Okay, I got you. Earlier, you made me feel like it was more movement based, and the secondary part in the adult world is actually more sellable.
Yeah, it's more broad, I would say.
I got you, kid. So I do know that I remember seeing pictures of you in your senior project. And I'm not really sure if that's what you call it at that school, but I'm imagining.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Stephen, give us an insight into what your project was, what your work team was. Give me something that our kids can live through for a second, because that senior project is important. It's the whole thing, right?
Kind of. I honestly had a bad senior project experience, so it'll be kind of interesting, my story. So our project, it was to come up with a collapsible shipping container, because if you ever ship something ginormous overseas, you put it in a big shipping container, but at the end of the day, you have a shipping container at your destination, and you either get it back, you ship it back, and it takes up just as much space as it did on the way there, or what the companies were doing at the time, they would just throw the shipping container away, because it was cheaper to do that, to just get a new shipping container than to ship it again. So where we came in, our task was to minimize that waste by making a collapsible shipping container, so that you could ship it there, and then on the way back you could collapse a bunch of them and ship a bunch more in a smaller volume.
Correct.
So we were partnered with UTC, and they're one of the local companies down in Chula Vista. And so like we would go to, we actually visited the UTC like company buildings like a few times, and we got to talk with the engineers, basically like what their requirements were, what kind of parts would actually be going in the shipping container once we built it. And the things that were going inside were called nacelles, and it's basically like the outside of the jet engines that go on airplanes.
Okay.
So they're shipping these big giant covers, and there needs to be some kind of internal supports for the box for these parts. And so that's something that we had to consider as well with our design of our collapsible shipping container.
Correct. And you're working for UTC as an outside of school project that they're facilitating because they desire this as an end project?
So the way that it works at UCSD, at least, is it's all part of this 2-quarter class that every engineer takes at the end of their senior year. Okay. And what companies will do, they'll come to UCSD and they'll say, hey, we have a general need for this or this or this, and then that's kind of how they assign projects based on these company needs. And oftentimes like these companies, it'll just be like a prototype to them usually. It's never usually like a finished working product.
But it's a start of combining ideas in a way in which you can see at least a mock-up.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the start of an idea, basically, is what it is for these companies.
It's something to sell to someone else. Look what I can make.
Yeah.
We got you.
Yeah. More realistically, though, it's something to talk about in your job interview.
For you, it ends up being a job interview item. Okay. So I think, honestly, I've never really realized that's how the research was going on at UCSD, and the idea of how they're sharing within the engineering community the power of their students, basically.
Yeah,
and they're getting a grade, and then they get the information they desire.
Yeah.
And UTC does engines.
They do like engines, nacelle assemblies, or engine assemblies, nacelles. They do all sorts of things that are centered around like the engines of aircrafts.
And I'm pretty sure right now I'm triggering in my mind that I actually know someone that works there who has a couple kids.
Warren Finch, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's why that name sounds so familiar. So we'll give a shout out to the Finches who are probably out there in the crowd. There's more than one of you.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of cool and funny because the idea would be we're looking at them having a dad who works someplace that you end up getting assigned, and so you're there. Don't know if you ever cross paths, but it sounds like your work team could have worked a little better. It could have been a little more efficient.
Yeah. So the actual problems that I was talking about earlier is that I was in a team of 5 people, and these people, like I commuted my last year of college. So I was, like realistically an hour and a half away because with traffic, it takes an hour to get to UCSD. And then the reality of commuting is that to UCSD at the time, at least, was that you had to park off campus and then take a shuttle to campus, which took like another 30 minutes. It was horrible. And so whenever like my team would work on the project, they would kind of do so like 5 minutes notice. They'd be like, okay, everyone, let's go work on the project. But meanwhile, I'd be at home, not able to come. I'd be like, oh, I'll do what I can remotely. And so
not that you weren't willing, but your team didn't recognize the concept of your need in that situation.
Yeah. So like I told them about it. I was like, hey, give me some heads up. Like, I don't want to be useless. Like, I did as much remotely as possible.
Yeah.
But like, honestly, there was that class was my first and only C in college. And that was so disappointing because it was like, it felt like my grade depended on these other people,
Correct.
And so
you have a population of people out there listening right now, and they've all been in that spot where they've been in that group and they worked and that group brought their grade down. And there's that reality that sometimes in life, but it does give you that wow, positive feeling about the way the Mustang Robotics teams sometimes work. Like that was cool.
Yeah.
So you knew that teamwork could actually, you've seen good teamwork. You brought good teamwork to UCSD.
Yeah. It seemed
at the
like
end of the day, you felt okay.
I felt good knowing that I had done everything that I could have done. So like I didn't feel guilty at the end of the day.
Good
But
man.
like my teammates, some of them were nice, some of them weren't so nice.
Well, welcome to the world.
Yeah,
World
exactly. That's the real
people
world.
of all sorts. We always talk about good karma in Mustang Robotics and just be good to people. You never know who's going to help you or who's not, and you might as well be nice to everyone. And so, Steven, we hit senior year. You do your senior project. You dress in your gown. You have your little sash. You got your fancy hat. You run around and say, "I graduate! Yay!" And congratulations for that, kid. It always makes me smile, like thinking about this. But then we get that next moment, and that next moment is heading off into some sort of way of taking what you've learned and applying it to the world, and trying to put a couple bucks in your pocket. And you have your right out of the gate. You choose something that, in my mind, you kind of make me feel like doesn't fit. It isn't necessarily where you are now. And so I would kind of say you've had kind of 4 different little things going since you graduated college.
Yeah. So the first job that I got out of college, it was at a machine shop, and it was this engineer, and he made basically like little kind of machines or like contraptions for the biomedical industry, like specifically like he did a lot of work for Illumina. Like he would kind of make like the machines that would like open packages or like retrieve the samples or kind of like fill bags, kind of those kinds of things. But he would do
automated process stuff.
Yeah, exactly. He would do it for the biomedical industry.
So that germs are processed, whatever it was processed, and didn't have to come into human contact, reduce the amount of like germs that you give to the item, like sanitary reasons, right?
No, he didn't have to make like super clean things, but he just like kind of worked for those kinds of companies in general. Like those are the kinds of companies that contracted his work.
And knowing where you are now, that doesn't fit your style because you're repeating all day long, making kind of the same thing.
No, so like I actually enjoyed this first job out of college.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was kind of like more of his helper, but in reality, he needed more of like a seasoned engineer, and I was like fresh out of college. I knew how to CAD. I could try and help, but like he realistically needed someone more experienced, and so it didn't work out, unfortunately.
Kept a positive relationship that one day you go back and maybe get it. Yeah, that's cool.
We're still super friendly, like a positive experience for sure. Like I'm glad that I did that.
But there is definitely reality that experience is experience.
Yeah.
You come with experience, you can do a lot more. And that's why we say never like stop learning. Always be willing to learn.
Yeah.
So the first job lasts about how long?
It only lasted like 3 months, 2 months. And it was part-time too. And the way that I spun that to my next job is I called it an internship.
And in some ways it actually kind of was. It was that 3 months. It was a paid internship. So exactly. Your next job gets into a different type of field a little bit.
Yeah. So the next job that I got was at this place called San Diego Composites. I talk about kind of what that is for.
I think at this point, Steven, you can tell us whatever you believe would intrigue the audience. And I'm a little intrigued to try to figure out how much I can ask and not ask when we talk about defense stuff. So it would be easier for you to just tell us what you think you can tell us.
Oh yeah. Well, I can talk about most things, like there's not things I can't really talk about.
All right.
Carbon fiber parts, they're a lot more complicated than traditional like metal parts because
where's your enjoyment in that job? It sounds like you is it fun? Is it fun for a while?
When I first started, the culture was a lot different from when I left, for sure. It was a small company kind of vibe feeling. Like it was a super laid back environment too. Like the only dress requirement was like you had to wear pants. You could just like wear a t-shirt or like jeans and whatever to work. And it was chill. It was whatever. but it quickly got super busy for everyone, and
So
the
the
work.
tone of the company changed when they were sold.
I was just thinking, I'm like, man, if this ever gets used, like I was a part of it, and I was like, am I guilty if this gets used? And there's like a lot of like
A
guiltiness.
moralistic stance of how
Yeah,
you look at this and the reality of a paycheck compared to what that would actually be resulting in if it was ever fired. And
exactly.
that part does not pay off in your mind.
No,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
because like
so go ahead, Stephen.
we did work on a lot of cool things for sure. Like I did get to work on um, this one lunar lander that hasn't launched yet, but it's this private company's lunar lander. They're trying to send like some science missions to the moon, and I got to work on basically the body of the lander, like the big cylinder that's going to land. And I thought that was really really cool and like special to work on, like be like, oh, these parts are going to go to the moon. That's super awesome.
Way better than the idea that they'll explode. Uh,
But yeah,
but and Stephen, I actually crossed paths with you when you had that job, and you looked incredibly happy about that. And so I would definitely agree that you were enjoying the idea of that sciency sort of engineering, not so much the other part where you have death and destruction.
yeah,
And so everyone out there, guys, welcome to some of the decisions that you get to make as you walk through life and where you position yourself. And so Stephen changes direction, leaves that company, and now you go independent.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the last few months that I was working there, I had this idea. I was thinking like everyone has these 40-ounce hydro flasks or 32-ounce hydro flasks, whatever, the big size water bottles that don't fit in your car's cup holders, which was super annoying. It was rolling around on my passenger seat like every time I would drive home. Whenever I wanted water, it was just frustrating, because plastic is bad. And so I had this idea that I could make this cup holder adapter that would go in your car's cup holder and it would hold your water bottle. I was like, it's super easy, no big deal. I could make this, and I feel like it would sell pretty well because this is a common problem that a lot of people have, it seems like. And
And you're
so
using carbon fiber for this in this giant kiln machine? No.
no. So
What is your means by this product? How are
yeah,
you making this?
so I had bought in a 3D printer, and I was pretty into it. Like I'd so far only printed like a few useful things. Like I hadn't really designed any objects, like maybe a few little things, but not too much. This was like the first product that like I really put a lot of time and effort into making something that I think other people would want to use because it's something that I use.
And so
Um,
you're making these at home and then selling them through the internet?
yeah, so I designed it myself using SolidWorks, and I sell it online through Etsy. And so that's kind of what I've been doing since I left my job. I've been selling things on Etsy, and I started selling like a few other items too that I think would hopefully be useful, that things that all I use. And so I'm like, I think it's useful.
So guys, if you're out there and you want to investigate, I'm sure that Stephen can tell us what is the name of your company.
It's SoCal 3D on Etsy,
So,
no spaces. Yeah.
all right, my friends. So if you're interested in one of those water bottle holders, please support Stephen.
Yeah. Thanks for the
Um,
plug.
but what's interesting, Stephen, to me is and this is in the last few weeks when we were talking about you coming on in, you kind of threw something out at me that was like, wow, okay, cool. You've taken the 3D printing aspect and now you're applying it to help someone else solve a problem. Am I kind of correct with that?
Yeah. So one day I get this random call from one of my friends who is actually in one of my senior design class. He wasn't in my group, but like he like at least at UCSD, the engineering class sizes get smaller as you do like your upper division. So everyone in these classes, they kind of like know each other. You kind of make friends. And so one of my friends, he's up in UC Santa Cruz, and he this doctor from UCSD asks him if he has time to work on this basically device for him. It's this wafer, it's like this silicone wafer holder, and it's because he's working on a coronavirus test that will supposedly give back results in 30 minutes or 30 seconds.
Yeah, an amazingly quick time. Now, my first question is, since I see this little wafer, does that mean nothing goes up my nose anymore for this? Because, like, if we could avoid that, maybe I'd be really happy.
I honestly don't know how it works. I think it works with like saliva or blood, and so like you put like your DNA or whatever on this little chip, and then you put this chip in basically like this like external battery looking like device, and then it'll beam the results to your phone, and then you can say like it'll tell you on your phone, oh, you have coronavirus, or oh no, you don't.
Is the chip a what type of like? Can you tell us what the material is? Because you say 3D printer, and I think polycarbonate. The polycarbonate.
Well, so I honestly don't know too much about like the chip, but the part that I'm working on specifically is, before these chips like are usable, they have to go and test them, and the way that they come, it's on this like it's kind of circular wafer, and it's this really, really, really thin silicone wafer. And what they need to do is they need to go and probe all of these chips that are on this wafer. And so my job was
snapping the wafer.
Yeah, exactly. It's really delicate. And so my job was to make the holder for the wafer and the tester for the wafer. And what this doctor wants to do is he wants to modify a 3D printer to use this as like a wafer tester. And so
that's an interesting concept, to just take it and reprogram it, repurpose it, and instead of having a printer extruder, you're having some sort of probe.
Yeah,
mechanical probe.
Yeah, that's pretty much
what we're doing. Or a light sensor or something. Okay, that's really cool, because I got to tell you, Steven, I've been running over there in my head trying to figure out how you took a 3D printer to make a test or help with this. And this makes a lot of sense now.
That's
now, what's really cool is hearing the story makes me just go, wow, 3D printer can be applied in a lot of ways I've never thought about. Like, wow. All right, Steven, I think this was a wonderful conversation, and you got us from freshman year of VEX Robotics through Anaheim's Worlds. And now what we're going to do is earlier, Jacob had asked the audience if you guys have any questions, you can start putting them in the chat box. We'd love to give you guys a shout out. And a second or two, I'm going to have a couple of young ladies come on to into the conversation, and they'll start presenting a few questions for Steven to answer. But we do want to make sure that everyone out there, first, we thank you, Steven, for sharing a Friday evening with us.
No, thank you for having me.
You're an incredible part of Mustang Robotics, whether or not, I know that last week when we were talking, you were like, people don't even know me. I haven't been there in years. And you know what, your positive influence was so positive that maybe it's just me keep talking about you, but I really appreciate you. And this will, we don't get to go to campuses this year, so this may be the closest to a campus walkthrough that someone has for engineering at UCSD. And I think those kids, regardless of where they're at, and the rumor is we have kids in Oklahoma maybe listening to us, you know, if they want to come out to the coast where we have an ocean, cool.
One thing to say about UCSD is the views from the dorm rooms are awesome. My freshman year, I had an ocean view.
You had an ocean view. All righty. So I see Jai's here. And Jai, would you like to start us with our first question?
Yes, we have team 9545Z from Oklahoma wants to ask Steven, how has robotics helped you in your life?
Oh man, robotics has put me so far ahead compared to the other kids, like in my engineering classes. Like the class where it was like the most apparent was we had this freshman basically like a robotics design challenge, and we were put into teams of like 3 or 4, and we had basically like this little VEX game like on this table, and so we had to design our robots out of like I think it was like plexiglass, like 3D printed parts, and they gave us like a few like a list of parts, and basically I had to design the whole thing because I knew what I was doing. It's kind of bad to put it that way, but like I had a much better grasp of where you put the motors, where the center of gravity of a robot is going to be, like how things go together, how to make a base that doesn't sag, And more importantly, I learned just a bunch of basic like engineering fundamentals, like gear ratios, like different arm linkages. I feel like it gave me a lot better mechanical intuition overall. I feel like that's how it benefited me the most, because I just kind of had like I felt like I had a better sense of how things would move if I saw it on the computer compared to someone else.
And Stephen, we'll add to the idea that we were lucky enough to have a lot of different people in our group to be able to and who were willing to always talk. And so by the time I'm imagining you graduated high school, you had thousands of conversations with other kids about robots, and every one of those is an experience that you take to your next level.
Yeah.
And so, excellent question, you guys. Thanks for coming tonight and being part of this. Sophia's here, and Sophia, you got another question for us?
Yes, Mustang Robotics Team 507 would like to ask, what college engineering or general skills would you give to your high school self, especially relating to your experiences in robotics?
Wait, could you repeat the question again, the first part?
Of course. What college engineering or general skills would you give to your high school self, especially relating to your experiences in robotics?
You look back, you can go and whisper in the ear of little Steven. You can be like, Steven, you shouldn't be scared. I'm your future you. What are you going to tell him? What's he need to know about, like, hey, pay attention to this? What did you miss?
Honestly, I would do most things the same. I would tell myself, my younger self, is to not be afraid, because you're in a lot better position than you think you are. Because when I was in high school, I was always doubting myself because I thought other people were further ahead than I was. So I was always putting myself down. If you come into the idea that because I honestly never even felt like an adult until recently, because I thought other people had, their stuff, like their shit together so much more than I did. But just like, I think the realization that adults don't have it all figured out either, and that you are in a lot better position than you think you are. Just have the confidence to do what scares you. I think that's what I would say.
I like that. Don't be scared of what's coming around the next corner. Attack it. Believe in yourself.
Yeah, don't be afraid of the unknown.
Very nice. Yeah. Jai's back, and Jai, what you got for us?
So we have another member from Mustang Robotics 507 asking that, what is the creation that you made in the Yonder Club have made you the most proud?
I kind of have two things. So my first year that I was in Yonder Dynamics, I specifically worked on like the sample collection tube, and so this is basically like my little project, because it was all me. I got to work on, it was basically like, it looked kind of like a revolver chamber. It had like 6 barrels, because then in each like of these like 6 barrels would go like a different sample, and it would rotate so that it would dispense the sample in the same place. You just rotate the canister a little bit, and then it goes into the next sample kind of holder area. So I was kind of proud of that, because it worked. And it was my first year, so I felt like I contributed. And then my second year, I was the lead for the composites team. And so we were in charge of making the carbon fiber parts for the rover. Unfortunately, like they ended up not using our parts, but they still ended up looking really cool. And I honestly feel like that helped me land my job at San Diego Composites, because not a lot of people have composites experience. So that was really valuable.
That's a good learning experience that immediately paid off in a little bit of a paycheck.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Sophia?
Another question from Mustang Robotics Team 507 is, how would you describe the difference between high school and college in regards to professors and the school curriculum?
Oh man, high school teachers will baby you so much compared to college. Like, I remember I had like one of the most hard ass professors I had. he marked off points off of my tests because like even though I had the right answers, I had the right units in my answer, but I didn't include the units in my work, and so he marked points off for that, and I thought that was the dumbest thing ever. And I still remember that, and I'm still salty about it like 5 years later. But there's just like a lot of little things that won't fly in college, like late work, not giving your all. Like it's fine to not even show up to college or not to not show up for classes. That's one thing that's nicer about in college is that if you have a super easy class, you don't need to go to class if you're able to pass a test. So there's a lot more leniency in college. There's a lot more freedom. Some people, like if you're very self-disciplined, like I feel like I am, it was a lot more beneficial to me. Like I enjoyed it a lot more than high school, because in high school they kind of have to police everyone based on like the lowest kid standards. And so sometimes everyone will get punished when the dumb kid does something dumb. But in college, it's basically like all on your own. Like, oh, if you didn't study, you didn't turn this in, you didn't wake up in time for the test, it's all on you. And so I enjoyed that. And I felt like I benefited a lot from that.
The demand of responsibility. And what I heard was you don't get any breaks.
Any breaks in college?
Yeah, well, your teachers are going to look at you like, no, like you were supposed to be responsible here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Jai's back. What you got for us?
So another member from Mustang Robotics 507 wants to ask, how would you recommend for students to build connection when they're in college?
Oh, you got to join clubs. Join clubs and organizations. For a brief period, I joined a fraternity. Like the party scene wasn't really my thing, but I met a bunch of people like through that, and it's a great way to meet people. Another way is through like office hours and research groups. Just like talking to people, also talking to professors like too. Like one thing that my college did, they had this thing called Coffee with Professors, where you could like choose a professor and go on like a coffee date with them, just basically like have a conversation. That's another good way to network. But I feel like that's important, just because I feel like all of the opportunities that I've gotten in my adult life they've definitely come through merit, but they've also all come from knowing someone. And because it's really that like people will get you ahead. And so knowing the right person is definitely beneficial.
So, Steven, do you ever know when you meet that person, or are you just lucky that you're nice to everyone? Just be nice to everyone,
yeah,
right?
honestly, yeah. The motto is be nice to everyone, because you never know, like, if you're talking to like some CEO who looks like a bum. But yeah, you honestly like, because this one friend who hit me up for this last opportunity with Pinpoint Science, the coronavirus test. Like we were just like we're just kind of like buddy friends. Like I didn't think that anything would come from this, but honestly, like just even your friends in college, having like people there who will think of you when an opportunity arises is super valuable to have.
Very good answer, kid. Very good answer. And definitely part of the way that we attempt to walk as Mustangs. I know that we constantly attempt to help anyone around us, and that's something I've tried to establish, but it really started back with you guys when we used to hand out parts to the teams we were playing against when they didn't have anything. And we cross our fingers, hopefully we'll still win, but it's funner to at least play in the finals against someone that just win.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes. All right. So I think, Steven, we're, unless the ladies pop back over on screen, we may be at the end of our episode today. And Steven, I think, and again, very grateful that you came and joined us, and an opportunity to interact with you. For a lot of the students that are seniors and juniors, this could be the closest thing to a campus walkthrough. And you may actually have a couple of them contacting you if they have some more questions.
Yeah, feel free to ask me more questions.
Yeah, I know you were cool with that. Steven, we say thank you very much. ladies and gentlemen out there in Twitch land or future YouTube land, if you're watching it there in the future, we thank you for joining us. And next week, please come back. We will have another episode at 6 p.m. And we hope you will join us. Have a wonderful night, everyone.
People try, it's the first thing they do. Only different, it happens to you. Only makes sense when speaking to you, but it got away.